My name's Dan Schrecker.
And I'm Jeremy Dawson, and together we were the visual effects supervisors on FRIDA. I think that the role of the effects in this film was to express Frida's creativity and her way of seeing the world. You saw in the movie how she plays with puppets, and her paintings are very sort of flat, and the perspective is dubious, and that's sort of part of the beauty of her work.
That mindset of trying to do stuff the way Frida did it kind of carried over in some ways to some of the animation and some of the shots we did.
This is an insert from a frame of when the blood drips from Frida's hand onto her dress and it turns into flowers. And I think in the film it's superimposed over the ink spilling.
Right. This is from the two Fridas sequence where you see the two Fridas side by side. It's the same image that appears on the poster.
And Julie had this idea to transition from this blood dripping and have it look like flowers. So what we ended up doing was literally in Mexico, sitting there with a camera for a whole night and stop frame animating. So we literally drop on some ink, shoot a frame of camera film, drop on some more paint, and then we'd go in with a brush and push it around a little bit. That's sort of one of the things that we did in this film, was use a lot less computer-generated imagery and use a lot more real imagery that was more composited or collaged together.
They are never gonna know what hit them. New York has Diego on fire.
The New York montage was a creature of necessity because this film all was shot in Mexico, and there was not, it came down to sort of things that had to be cut from the budget, and it called in the script for a sequence of New York storefronts to be built for them to walk in front of. So we came up with the idea of kind of creating a piece of artwork that would be reminiscent of both of Frida's diary and of her paintings. And that style, at that period in the early 1930s, there was a lot of photo montage going on with, especially with the sort of left-wing artists and with dot artists and constructivists. And so there's that idea of photography and urban metropolis photography collaging together was sort of floating around in the art circles she was floating around in. So we sort of had this idea of completely abstracting New York and making this be a completely animated sequence that represented both her diaries but also her letters home. It was all done in a program called After Effects. For us, it was a great program for doing this because it lets you work with images that are really, really huge. So this whole montage was designed as if it was a picture that was really, really, really maybe 5 times the screen in width, and we sort of made things move within there and then had the whole picture scroll left to right across the screen. Every piece in there is on a separate layer, so it can be turned on and off at will and moved, and some of them we have animating as the piece goes by.
We had someone who helped us out finding images that we incorporated into the collage, and then we also went out and shot a lot of our own footage and just stills around New York that we incorporated in that still maintained some of the period feel of that piece. In addition to that, we got stock footage of New York from that era. So as you pan across, you're not just seeing these stills, but there's also some moving footage sort of scattered throughout.
And don't forget the things we bought on eBay. We bought a real Stork Club matchbook from 1932 on eBay. We kind of went over the top with this, and we got
my father's stamp collection is incorporated in there as well at one point. So.
And then, of course, the footage of Frida and Diego. We had both stills of them, which some of them ended up in black and white in the collage. We had stills of, we shot some extras in Mexico to look kind of like Depression era, New York photography, sort of WPA kind of photography. So some of those were in there. And we also shot Frida and Diego moving against a green screen, and we placed that in. It's one of those things that everyone kind of took a leap of faith that it was going to look cool, and it came together.
For the King Kong sequence where Frida goes to the theater and sort of fantasizes that it's Diego playing King Kong, what we ended up doing for that sequence is shooting Alfred Molina against green screen and then just composited him into different shots so that he appeared as King Kong, and then played a lot with the look of the film and made it a little more dirty and weathered so that it looked like an old film.
We wanted to get Alfred Molina to try moving at different speeds and shooting with different camera speeds, and we did some of that. So some of it's not done from the purely natural motion. The airplanes in the background is a model airplane on a stick. A good example of where we could have used CGI, but we ended up working with a low-tech solution, was with the scene in the bathtub. That's sort of based on a composite between a couple of different FRIDA images that we'd seen. So one idea is it's sort of based on the suicide of Dorothy Hale painting, which is the socialite, I guess, who committed suicide by jumping off of a building in New York. And then there's also a painting called What the Water Gave Me, which is FRIDA looking, her point of view in the bathtub where her foot is sticking out of the water and the perspective is all strange, and there's a little Empire State Building in there and all sorts of a volcano and all sorts of other surreal imagery. So the idea was both to sort of use that Dorothy Hale imagery of this body falling down off of a building and combine it with this scene in the bathtub. And that was representing Diego and his sort of fall from grace once the Rockefeller Center mural was destroyed, and he went from being like the hotshot to sort of being persona non grata. The art department designed a King Kong doll and hand painted it, and we needed it to topple, so we used this high-tech solution of literally sticking a drill into the bottom of into the behind of King Kong and playing the the DeWalt drill on as slow a speed as possible and filming it and then sort of scaling it and toppling it through space. So that was sort of an example of like some of the ways that we didn't do things probably the way that would be the proper way to do it, but they somehow ended up fitting with the film.
One of the paintings that we used in the film was the wedding portrait. We shot the scene first, shot the live plate of the party with the dancers first, and then created a painting from one of the frames of that shot, so that we have a painting that matched up exactly with that live frame.
This is a good blend of looking like FRIDA, but also looking like Selma, and looking like Diego, and looking like Alfred Molina. That's an interesting one because in the middle of that push-in, we actually translated from it being the prosthetic to being something that we placed on a piece of the painting. It comes in, we freeze, you see that the column is breaking, and then you cut to the eye on the painting and her tears rolling down her cheek. And when the tears rolling down the cheek, that is actually the real painting, just shot on set with a little tube sticking on the back and somebody dripping liquid down there. So that was a good combination of being makeup, effects, photography, props, all in one little sequence.
The final sequence of the film takes place basically after FRIDA has died, and the whole idea is that when she died, she wanted her body burned. So Julie's idea was to have her in bed and have this bed just burst into flames with firecrackers and everything going off. So the challenge was basically, how do we burn a bed with Salma Hayek still lying there? The art department built basically a 3/4 size bed and a little bust of Selma's head. So that bed was then taken, put onto a rig that would float it like this.
And the reason that we needed that floating rig is because the normal way you might think of doing this is we'll just shoot it and make it move later in front of a background just in the computer. But that would have entailed shooting the bed in front of a green screen or blue screen, and we couldn't do that because the firecrackers and the flames and sparks just would have made it impossible to separate the foreground from the background. We shot, Salma in the bed with it not burning, and then we took her out and tried not to move everything, and of course everything moved and everything broke down, and it was the last, literally, not only the last shot of the film as it was edited, it was the last shot, of the entire, however many day shoot we'd been down there, and it was, I think, 2 in the morning, and we'd been going for 20 hours, and nobody had any patience. And we lit the bed and sort of burned that one to a crisp as well, and the take, it worked great. Afterwards, we had to make a composite between the flaming bed and her head, and we gave that to a painter who designed a FRIDA-like painting that this could then transition into. So this was like a very complicated shot that was sort of put together in many stages, and I guess they liked it well enough to sort of freeze it at the end, and it runs beneath the whole end credits.